Well, for many people, it was an academic exploration. In other words, what they thought about it. And it became a very strong foundation in philosophy. So a lot of what today we call mysticism is based upon a lot of these old ideas that you find literally from Aristotle and Plato and other types of philosophers came after Plato, called Neoplatonic philosophers. And it became the foundation of a lot of mysticism, a lot of what we today in the Jewish tradition call Kabbalah. But again, it is only a philosophical emphasis from an academic point of view, whereas from the point of our topic here, prophecy, it also gets into the expanded experiential realm where it goes beyond just what you think about it to what you actually experience. And I know the members of our panel here are all pretty much experiencers in that respect, so I'm sure we have a lot of fun things to talk about.
Thank you. Jonathan, in the ancient times, it seems that most everyone was somehow connected to the metaphysical realm. Today, we see people yearning to connect to the metaphysical world. Why is it in the modern world that so many of us want to reach beyond the physical realm?
Well, first of all, in the ancient world, things were not divided yet. You had a law, medicine, religion. It was all one thing, and often you would go to the same person. If you go all the way back to primal society, the guru, which would be the shaman, what we call the witch doctor from the Western perspective, was all things. So we are one. That is, we are beings with intelligence and bodies and spirits. And so what treats one part of us treats another. Since the division, which came along with cultivation, that civilization as in the cultivation of land, when we stopped being hunter-gatherers and started growing things, and then developed cities, and then developed science and legal systems, we got quite divided. And the part that got the emphasis was the part that was emergency, security, the control things, the practical things. So that is still true. Our attention, our energies will get mobilized if we're scared. Well, that will lead to a certain emphasis, a certain use of our energies, and we get very good at that. To the well-organized communities, to great technology. I often thought that the cathedral of our time is a huge airliner that can lift up and carry 300 or 400 people to Europe at the same time. This is an extraordinary achievement. What has been lost is daily contact with the soul. The inner life, the sense of meaning and connection with nature, with others, in community, with ourselves, with our own bodies, on the ground, grounded, embodied, empowered. And I'm a psychologist, you can hear a lot of growth terms in there. But and at one time, it was all, if you were living in a certain place, it was all that religion. And everyone in the room, everyone as you went down the street, was all in the same belief system. And you didn't have to ask, what is your faith? Everybody knew, because everybody was the same thing. Now, on another continent, it was something else, but it was all one. So we are now fragmented and feel it. And part of our distress, mental, emotional, physical, is from this fragmentation. So we yearn for wholeness and holiness. There's the metaphysical need to fit in our own lives, and for our own life stories to fit in to a larger story.
Rabbi, the ancient texts are filled with stories of seers and prophets telling and looking deep into the future, seeing into the future. How does this bring this up to today? Are we still capable of doing this? Do we still have this skill? And what exactly is a prophecy?
Well, the ancient techniques that were actually practiced in biblical times weren't ever lost. I mean, we've lost the Ark of the Covenant and many of the other things, which are the external apparatus. But the internal, if you will, the spiritual and or the psychological, which actually cause these things to activate, have always been practiced and known to this day. I'm sure that we're going to talk about some of the topics we were talking off stage, like we were mentioning some things about Nostradamus and the like. And I was just mentioning to David that their material, secret knowledge that has been known for many, many years, and shockingly, believe it or not, for the first time in the last 2 months, an ancient text over 500 years old, which is believed to have been the foundational text taught of the prophetic school, which is also believed to have been associated with the teachings of Michel de Nostradam, because it was taught how to use what we call the sarakos, which is the gazing into the waters and using that as a reflective technique of the mind to experience within it projected thought in vision. That book for the first time has now been published. In Hebrew, of course. I mean, like, scholars know that these things are out there in, some, library and manuscript, and all of a sudden all this stuff's starting to come out. Well, these are techniques and practices that, in ancient traditions, people have been observing and practicing. Jonathan studies this stuff. Carolyn practices this stuff from her traditions as well as I do from mine. And now all this stuff is now coming out. Prophecy, predicting the future, is a rather quantum experience in that, remember, the future is never written. So therefore, there are always multiple potentials of application. So many people will see something. Now that doesn't mean that it's definitive, because there's always the opportunity to alter, shift, or change. And that is why prophecy, read the prophecies in the Bible, in all due respect, not every one of them ever came true, but yet they're still true prophecies, because they're based upon a subjective potential. And this is why prophecies occur. They could be warnings like, this is going to happen if. Well, if you take advantage of that if, and you've shifted things. That's the power of recognizing that time and space is not as rigid as we understand it, but by the power of mind and consciousness, when properly trained, can have an influence.
Caroline, tell me a little bit about Nostradamus. Who was he? And where do we think his abilities might have come from?
So for me, it's very easy, because I had my own experiences since I was 5, and I've been working with hundreds of people around the world. So many people have similar experiences. The thing is, we come in as a consciousness. We inhabit a human body, but we don't stop being that consciousness. It's kind of funny to think that as soon as we are in a material form, we stop being that expanded energy. And that expanded energy, we're supposed to use it. We're supposed to continue this communication with the beyond. And so I think many children are doing this spontaneously. It's very, very simple, actually, if we are trained or if we just allow it to happen. And so I think that we are meant to continue this communication, to receive guidance, to understand what we are here to do, and what the big story is. What is the purpose of us being here? What is the point? I think it's a little bit more than building greenhouses and, saving the planet, or, there's a bigger story that is a co-creation with other worlds. And to me, these are the divine worlds, the spiritual worlds. And so some of us that we call, the Notre Dame, I'm going to pronounce it, the right pronunciation is Notre Dame. So Nostradamus in English. So those types of individuals were very comfortable with the process. They continue to keep those channels with the spiritual world open. And when you do that, you kind of train yourself to know how to do it. And if everybody's doing that, we're thinking, our thoughts are invisible, but they still have a frequency. They have a measurable frequency. And you're pouring this information into the collective consciousness. So we're all pouring information into this very large collective pool. So if you train yourself, you will know how to tap into this pool, because we're all plugged into that pool anyway. Whether we know it or not, we feel it or not, we are tapped in. And so what happens is, as we are pouring this information into the collective consciousness, which is also what people call the Akashic records, what happens is that it's all a form of energy that eventually is going to have a momentum. The momentum means you can pretty much predict where it's going. That is called the world of probability, meaning if we're all thinking this is the end of the world and probably this is going to be the probable future because we keep pouring in that same information into the collective pool. And the more we do that and the longer we do that, the more that potential becomes a reality. And so, of course, the other way around, if we all think there is a way that planet Earth is headed in the right direction, in a good direction, in an enlightened direction, we keep pouring that information in, then that is where the collective consciousness is going to probably, the world of probability is going to have that prediction. So if you are tapped into that collective consciousness, you can just simply see and know and understand, of course, there's a bit of training with that, where is the world of probability going? In the case of technology, I see that is the momentum that has been created. In the case of spiritual advancement, in the case of economy or what have you. So that is why when we can pretty much predict the future, the more momentum we have in one area. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Caroline. So this Friday we'll be premiering an episode for you called The Alien Brain, and in that episode we do feature the story of Nostradamus. Jonathan, for you, I mean, so many of us can't remember what we had for breakfast yesterday, but why do we as humans yearn to understand and know what our future will be, and why do we turn towards prophets to let us?
First of all, I've got to say this. A rabbi, a psychologist, and a metaphysician walk into an auditorium. And everyone says, not again. We're very interested in the future, is why we watch the news. What is new, what is happening, what's going to happen? We're going to be living our lives in the future. So spiritual teachers and magicians of all kinds have speculated or known in various ways. And some famous, like Nostradamus, have written it down and it can be tested and checked. And so we've had a couple of programs on this, which is a fascinating topic. We all know about the future in our bones in various ways. As a psychologist, I'm very interested in dreams, and people will very often have a dream about something that's about to happen. I don't know if it's magic or not. I don't know if it's a metaphysical event, because I think there are little clues to what's going to happen that we haven't quite noticed, that we've picked up. Now, this is a less magical theory, but that we have filed away or just absorbed. We know a lot more than we know that we know. We also remember a lot more than we remember. That is, in various ways within, things that we've seen, things that have come by, get filed away or lost, but they're still with us somewhere. And in an unconscious way, below the level of awareness, these things rattle around and patterns form, and we see that little clue that we picked up at the drugstore matches that little clue when we were talking to our cousin on the phone yesterday. Now, we're not doing all this intentionally. It would take a lot of energy, but we're doing it. And then a dream comes out. The thing about a dream is there's a pattern in a dream. It mostly speaks to us through images, and images are very rich in information. In fact, a picture is worth 1,000 words, as the cliche says, and that's why pondering an image, learning to read the picture language, learning to understand the metaphor, what is the dream trying to tell me, very often will tell us what's coming up for ourselves. Very often there are medical implications. People will be aware that they've got some ailment that they hadn't detected, and they'll go to the physician, and the physician says, "Good thing you came in. The tests show," and so, well, why did we come in? Because we had some inkling, or because we had a dream of being very ill, or someone we know and we're very close to showed up in the dream who has been dead for years from a heart attack. We went and had our heart checked, and sure enough, it was time, and they tell you to start exercising more and all of that. So I think we are very interested in the future, partly for security reasons. We don't want rude surprises. We don't want to be unprepared for things, and partly because it is our connection to the ongoing arc of the story of our lives. People call it destiny. Joseph Campbell called it the heroic journey. We're in a story. It is terribly important to understand where we have come from, where we are now, and where we are going. It's our identity. It is our calling. And it means a lot to us to know what these things are.
Rabbi, just how do people like Nostradamus attach or connect to this, what some may call an extraterrestrial realm of knowledge? What sort of methods might they use?
Well, this is a point that I think is very important to understand. I see we have a very great opportunity that we have Caroline with us. Caroline's a very, very special human being. She shares in her story that since the age of 5, she's had these experiences. Now, that's not what's unique. What's unique is she's able to continue the experience. She remembers them, she embraces them. That's what makes it special. You see, every one of us has the potential and the opportunity, but most of us have it repressed, pushed down, and we forget it. The connection that we're all seeking is always there. We all want to know the future. Why? Did you ever ask yourself? Here's your answer. How many of you would like to have right now the winning numbers of this week's multi-million-dollar lottery? Close your eyes, and there are the numbers. Is anyone here saying, not me, I'm not. I could care less. Really? Okay, well, give it to me. I'll take it. Now, what I'm saying is this. Ever since long, long ago, far, far away, whatever, everyone has always known deep within, because we have forgotten, that there's more to this reality than what the eye sees and the ear hears. That's the foundation. That is what has motivated us. And that's why we're in business pretty much here. We're not here to try to teach you something new, as much as to try to help you remember what many of us have forgotten. So how do you do that? That's what David's question is. Well, in every religion, in every culture around the world, there have always been techniques. Go back into the Bible, the story of Joseph. If you remember when Joseph saw his brothers, okay? Joseph was viewed in ancient Egypt as being a magician. He had a magic cup that he would be able to gaze into the wine and he would see images. Somehow, somewhere, something connected with his mind and enabled him to see things in the image of the wine. People have done this through the years with tea leaves and tarot cards and all these other types of projections. Something subtle within that you use in external form to kind of help remind you. In psychology today, it's the foundation of what they call the ink blot, the Rorschach test. Where once you go to the doctor, you see these bunch of blots. What do you see in it? Oh, I see dancing native girls. I see flying saucers. The guy said, what do you see? I don't see that. Well, it's a projection of your mind because it's inside you, and all it needs is a tool, a vessel to come out. So, the Michel de Nostradamus, number one, he was Jewish. That's very well documented. He disappeared for a period of time, is well known. And then he comes back with this power and ability far beyond that of mortal man. And he is doing his prophecies by looking into this, bowl of water. Well, that same technique was the one that Joseph was using in ancient Egypt. That same technique is the one that the rabbis were using in Safed in the Holy Land and the other side of the world. And it's that same technique that has been continuing. It is taught, it is experienced, and it leads people to abilities to understand and perceive not just the outside world, but the inside world. Matter of fact, I just posted something on Facebook this morning when I was doing my workout. I had this thought that came to me, and I said, these are the thoughts I had to share. You know how it says in the X-Files, the truth is out there? So I put this thing on my Facebook. I said, the truth is out there, yes, but you will only recognize it if you first see it within yourselves. And I think that's the most important lesson here. So the techniques of how to experience, Caroline works with these things. I know Jonathan helps people with these. This is what we do. And again, it's not that we have something new to learn. It's to remember what we've already lost. So essentially, our future is our past. And that's what connects the whole circle.
Thank you.
So, we look around and we know that animals somehow know how to find their way home. Even plants actually communicate with each other through frequency. They talk to each other. They warn each other about weather. Do you know that? So, of course, we think that, okay, this is instincts in the case of animals. But to me, it's a guidance system. So it's throughout nature, all intelligent life have a guidance system. We come into a material world and we are equipped with this guidance system. The guidance system allows us to continue this communication beyond the body, just like the animals do, just like plants do. We are meant to continue with this communication with our higher consciousness or even other worlds for the purpose of receiving this guidance to tell us which path we are meant to be taking, which direction we are going, what the future holds. I have a little bit of an issue with the future thing, because I feel like a lot of the time we look at the future just to give us some sort of security. And at the same time, as we do this, we're looking outside ourselves and thinking that the future is going to tell us what to do and what we should be doing, when in fact, we should be in the moment. And as we are in the moment, feeling and noticing and understanding through our guidance system where we're supposed to be going, that is how we create the best future for us. And so we come in equipped with this very natural, very spontaneous guidance system. But guess what? By the age of 5 or 6 or 7, we forget, and we are told by our parents, stop doing this, nobody's there, don't talk to invisible beings, this is not how it works. Then we grow up and our friends make fun of us. Before we know it, we forget how to use this natural guidance system. So fast forward a few years in our teenage years, we're totally cut off from this communication, this natural system that helps us stay connected with our higher consciousness. That's why we feel separate. With all the Facebooks and all the texting in the world, we are more separate than ever because we're looking for stimulus outside, validation outside of ourselves. And so because of that, unfortunately, and plus our mind is talking. I mean, who's got a problem with quieting their mind? The mind chatter is insane. So between our mind chatter and other people telling us to stop doing this, stop, use your head, don't use your heart, when making decision, before we know it, we forget. That is the reason why, unfortunately, we have to retrain ourselves. So there's very simple protocols that you could put in place that will allow you to just shut off the outside world for a moment, quiet your mind for a moment, and just go within. And if you retrain yourself, so I have some very simple protocols. We tried that in the regression session the other day. We're going to do that again. But if you just take a little bit of time to find the best protocol for you that will allow you to, again, go shut off the outside world, go back within, and just simply through intention, I want to tap back into my guidance system. I don't want other people telling me what to do. I know who I am. I want to tap back into the source. The source, the hub, the brain, the intelligence of the entire universe. We're meant to be doing that. And so because of that, I think there's a little bit of training, a little bit of protocol. But if you give yourself that chance, you could be right back on track.
Caroline, can we talk a little bit about a practical application of that? I think everybody here would like to know how to do that and how to apply that in their own lives. In the episode that's coming up on Friday night, we meet a gentleman at the Ryan Institute in North Carolina who's not only capable of telekinesis, and we see it, it's shocking, but he claims he can also heal people by manipulating energy.
Of course.
I have to ask you though, is this something we can all do?
I've been doing it since forever. And I'm like the rabbi said, I'm not the only one. Everybody can do this. That's the point. And so we're training people to move objects and to change the pH in water just using your intention. It's not about moving the piece of paper. That's, who cares? But wait. If I am able to affect the pH of water through my mind, we're doing this on camera with all the cameras watching, bunch of people watching, so it's not, there's other people there, and we are able to repeat this experiment over and over and over. This tells us that there's a measurable effect of my mind over matter. If I can change the pH in water, I can change it in my body. We've done it with DNA samples taken from women placenta. We've changed the electrical conductivity in the placenta. In 10 seconds, it would shoot up 400%, exactly at the time where we're focusing our intent. Increasing the electrical conductivity in water or in DNA, it's been researched and there's scientific papers on that, makes the DNA more able to self-repair. All this to say that if you can do this to a sample outside yourself, you can do it to your own body, and of course, to somebody else's body. So energy healing, that still looks like a woo-woo thing. It is not. There's real science, but current science is not looking there. Although we're working with some really very cool scientists we are measuring all these effects. And so, but all this takes a little bit of training, and these are the applications. So we use these experiments to train the mind. And trust me, you can't do this if your mind is like chatting, talk. That's why mind quieting, releasing blocks, raising your vibration, aligning your mind channel with specific frequencies sounds very complicated, but it's very simple. You do it a few times, and that gives you the accuracy. Because if you're trying to change your headache, for example, heal something that's going on in your body, you need to know the root cause. You can't just say, although a lot of people can do that and kids can do that, you can just focus on your head and say, I'm willing this headache to go away. And a lot of times it does go away. But you have to have the precision, the accuracy to know why this headache is there in the first place and why it keeps coming back. So this training has incredible practical applications. You can heal yourself, you can shift so many things, and more importantly, you have more clarity on what it is that needs to happen in your life. So very simple training, few things to do, huge application across your entire life.
Jonathan, the mainstream science world has come around recently. They're making statements that consciousness controls or creates our reality. As a psychologist, what do you make of this? I mean, this is what Caroline's talking about.
Let me pick up on a couple things and get to that. Ariel was talking about forms of practices of divination using bowls of water that have ancient roots. And you can study the ancient texts and find these things and replicate them to some degree. Or you could watch The Lord of the Rings and see Galadriel bring the bowl of water out and have Frodo look into the future. And he was terrified because it showed the Shire, those of you who are into Lord of the Rings know what I'm talking about, all destroyed. And then Galadriel, as the metaphysical teacher of the moment in this scene in a popular movie, says, well, that's a possible future. You still have agency there. So the future, we can look into it in various ways, but it is not always set. We can still have influence. And sometimes it's useful to see a rather frightening scenario, realize we better get busy, because unless we do something, that's going to happen in our own lives or collectively. And Caroline was talking about what I would call devotional practices. She calls them other things, protocols. Her terms are fine. In medical research, it's been shown that meditation is often called mindfulness, has enormous healing power. It can aid recovery from strokes and serious medical difficulties. In psychological, psychotherapeutic circles, adding a practice of some kind. And some of them come from religious backgrounds, but they're not limited to religious use. When I was in Bible college, we were not only to worship and study, but to do our devotions. Some of you know this phrase. And that was scripture and prayer, and it was a daily thing. The dailiness of it is enormously important. If you do a reflective practice, one of these protocols, the frequency is of enormous significance because the world is noisy. And we have anxieties and we have aspirations, and it crowds in. And the quiet work of stilling ourselves, stilling the chatter, the monkey mind, and letting quiet enter us has competition. And so frequency helps. If you will do this, some kind of protocol, some kind of devotional activity every single day, the benefits will be many, many times multiplied over doing it once in a while, or even skipping, even every other day. It's much better frequency. We need this, although you have to give yourself a bit of a sales job, because the part that's concerned about money says, no, work on this project. You need to you'll make something for this. Or the part that's worried about security, be sure to fix the lock. There's always the possibility of an intruder. Those voices are very loud. We need to work on our value system and realize the inner life is our treasure. It's the beautiful thing about us. The imagination, our emotional life, the body, this is our life. We're in here. We're out there too, but first of all, we're in flesh and blood. We're incarnate, to combine a theological notion with a medical notion, okay? First of all, we're bodies, we're animals, and we have animal knowing. And to know that additional wisdom, it requires a kind of focusing. And that the methods, you get on the line, God gave us the internet, you can get everything quickly. And there will be demonstrations on YouTube, and you can see how to do these things. It's not rocket science, it's mostly a value structure, a struggle. It's getting that a little higher on our sense of priorities. And the benefits are enormous. I have a connection to the UCLA School of Medicine. They have a mindfulness center there. They're training physicians. I'm involved in this to not only prescribe pills and things, but to look into your exercise, to look and see, are you meditating? Are you doing something for and they very carefully don't use the word spiritual, but are you doing something to be more mindful? And because we're realizing in medical research that we're one thing, and that all the parts of our being need to be addressed to get healing, which is interesting, etymologically connected with wholeness.
Thank you. Rabbi, another question I'd like to know is, in biblical times, who were those that were capable of prophecy? Were they special? Were they somehow different? I mean, we've done episodes that discuss people like Einstein and even Steve Jobs and world leaders who have access to this extraterrestrial realm of knowledge. Sometimes we call it the Akashic Record.
Finally, you brought the right word into our conversation. We're here to talk about ancient aliens and extraterrestrials. We haven't even brought that connection in yet. And that, I think, is the most important point of tying it all together. There's an old Kabbalistic teaching that states, Efo Adam Hoshev Shamhu, which means where a person thinks is where they are at. And I think that summarizes a lot of what Jonathan and Caroline and I have been saying throughout our entire time here. The power of the mind is the power of the soul. And understand one thing about it. This is not magic. Everything that Caroline and Jonathan is discussing, this is not magic. It's not hocus pocus. It is normal.
Yes.
It is everyday stuff. Right? If you want to accomplish this, just like accomplishing anything else, well, you don't just like close the eyes and say, it's there. No, you gotta go and exercise and go to school, if you will, and learn and practice one step at a time. That is how biblical prophecy was. We all have the fantasy, believe it or not, from maybe watching our TV shows and movies, that a prophet in the days of the Bible is just someone, man or woman, la-di-da, walking down the street and they hear the spiritual doorbell, ding-dong. Who's that? It's the Lord. Right. Well, it never really happened like that. The Bible makes it very clear that there were schools that the individual men and women attended, and they learned specific ways of becoming mindful. They combined this with meditation, music, and dance. The original biblical prophetic experience was rather both shamanistic as well as very aborigine. It was very natural. And those techniques have never ever been lost. The only problem is most people today don't practice them anymore. And well, what happens if you don't use a certain muscle? Well, it atrophies and gets weak. Well, I know the mind is not actually a muscle, but let's just symbolically call it that and say, if you don't use it, then you are abusing it. And that's really the great secret. So what David's question is about the connection, building this in ourselves. Well, why do you think our alien brothers and sisters are watching over us? Why do you think they're here? Because their technology, which is a lot older than ours, is not mechanically based. It is what, for lack of a better word, we'd call mind or psychically based. That's why they're always communicating with us telepathically and everything else. That's the universal language. They look at us as, again, being forgetful. All they're trying to do is remind us. And the whole continuity of things building now in our society, we're becoming aware of their presence. And at the same time, we're becoming more aware of our own presence. And by doing so, we're again getting to the point where we're going to connect. We're going to realize that us and them, we're going to connect not in the realm of the mechanical, but in the realm of the psychic, the realm of the mind. Reconnect and realize, and that's the correct word, I think, realize that which in ancient biblical times they always called the Messianic era.
Caroline, I know you'd like to add to that.
Yeah,
we were talking earlier about your idea that extraterrestrials, their greatest desire is to help us in this process.
Right.
A little bit about that.
Yeah, just a quick side note first, just to say that, there are common denominators for you to be able to tap into these worlds. There's not one protocol or one way of doing it, because sometimes we think that, I'll just go do this one technique or one meditation and it'll get me there. I train people, and so I know that you all have your own way. You have to have certain basic understanding, which is the quieting of the mind and things like that. But beyond that, the guidance system is very subjective. So that there was just a quick side note that I wanted to say. But once you open up to this guidance system and these channels open up, it's not just about you to see the future. It's for you to continue the communication with extraterrestrials, your lineage. We were talking about yesterday in my talk about everyone here looks human, but I think most of us don't come from here. So we have a lineage beyond the human lineage. Before we were ever incarnated in a human family, we come from other locations within the universe. And so those channels of communication don't get severed once we're incarnated. They stay open. Once you are connected to a lineage, it's there forever. And so we are meant to continue this communication with our extraterrestrial friends or family and other types of beings as well, if we know how to do it. That is the point, so that we get a bigger story, so that we can perhaps download or understand more about the human nature. And so I think it's extremely purposeful, not just in our daily life, but to continue to bring that extraterrestrial communication and presence. And you asked the question about Einstein and those folks, what was different. I think they were just open. I don't know if they had, all of them, a specific protocol. Some of them maybe did. But the idea was that they were open to the idea. They accepted the fact that when they did get some sort of download, it was perhaps that they were communicating with a more advanced civilization or a more advanced being that was telling them how to do something, how to solve a problem. So I think this, understanding is extremely important, that we are meant to continue this communication and this connection with our extraterrestrial friends.
Thank you. Okay, folks, we have about 20 minutes now to entertain some of your questions. If you'd like to ask a question of our panel, please step up to the microphone here. We ask, out of the respect to other guests, that you kindly state your name and get to your question as quickly as possible so that we can answer as many of your questions as possible.
Hi, thank you all. My name's Marina. First of all, Caroline, I'd like to know what book you have that kind of gives us those steps. Which one is it?
First of all, I have a free meditation on my website, carolinecory.com. It's called Connecting to Source. By the way, not all meditation do the same thing. Some meditation make you quiet, some meditations make you do certain things. This specific meditation that I created allows you to quiet your mind, align your mind channels specifically with certain frequencies that bypass your human mind. So it's very, very specific. So that is on my website, and then you'll also see all kinds of courses. Go to the online university. There's one specifically on mastering your guidance system. It trains you to go back to this protocol, but it's a bit of a training. And then beyond that, you have other courses as well. So that's the best way. You'll also find my books on there. But I can come down at the marketplace and tell you more about that, in terms of which book is better for you. But everybody can start with that one course, Mastering Your Guidance System.
Okay, and if I may, one more thing. I want to say thank you, because I have always felt that this collective consciousness is actually kind of layered.
Yes.
And I feel that there is collective consciousness around the earth. And I frequently send out those energies and those vibes, and at the moment it's more of helping our politicians to open up some and get some of that good loving energy. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you know what you're doing is not woo-woo stuff. I'm telling you, I talk about that within the patterning of space itself, of time, space itself. Every thought frequency that you put out is actually embedded in the fabric of space itself. And if we all did that, 7 billion people and humans since the beginning of time, everybody's pouring all this information within the fabric of time-space, this is what ends up happening. We are now within this collective consciousness. So start pouring the right stuff.
Start pouring, people, start pouring.
Thank you
so much.
All right, next question.
Hi, my name is Greg Monroe. So I have a couple questions. One first for you, Rabbi.
One question per customer.
Unless
you can ask them both.
Decide which one I would ask then. But I was really curious how you handled the dichotomy of the ancient alien theory with the religious aspect of your life, and I mean, how is that handled?
Well, actually, I've already answered that question, because when we're talking about the others who are working with us, well, they're messengers from beyond. The Hebrew word for a messenger is malach, which we translate as angels. And I discussed all about this in my book, Aliens, Angels, and Demons. So as to help bridge this gap, which should not exist, because again, that where we're heading towards in the future is only going back to where we were originally in the past. There is no distinction between that. And that's actually one of the more important messages that I try to help people understand. Like Caroline, my school is specifically geared towards teaching people techniques of experience of how to be able to grasp this reality, not through my eyes, not through academic accomplishment, but through your own personal experience. So again, there is no distinction. There is no division. When you can see from within, from the biblical point of view, with your biblical eyes, you will see this and you will say, it is the same.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, come on up.
I'm James Sales. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Archaeology from Ohio State University. In 1990, I was working on an ancient history manuscript that fixed all of the problems with the Sumerian and Egyptian dynasties. But in the process of that, I had to deal with Genesis 1. I discovered it was a pattern that I later understood was the lower 7 Sephiroth. But it doesn't end there. The story of Adam and Eve also is divided into 7 parts. It follows that same pattern. And so the second week is the Garden of Eden, the third week, the lineage of Adam, the fourth week, Noah, fifth week, Abraham, sixth week, Isaac, seventh week, Jacob, eighth week, Joseph. It doesn't stop there. There's 8 weeks in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, 40 weeks. If you go over to Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Acts, that was also edited to 8 weeks. It's 40 weeks. If you go to Proverbs, it's divided in 8, 10, and 12, which is 30 days.
I'm betting there's a question in there somewhere.
There is a question.
All right, let's get to it.
When you add up all the time, it comes to exactly 7 years, 42 months, and 1,260 days. It's a cube. It's the Ark of the Covenant. It's the Holy Grail. The whole thing is what all of these people have been talking about. That's been a hidden thing.
Doesn't sound like a question.
No, the question is, have you ever heard of this? And are any of you interested in it?
I will tell you, I'm very well aware of these ideas, and I'm going to share with you something, echoing this. Jonathan, I'm sure you know that Professor Carl Jung made a very important statement that there are many racial subdivisions in the collective unconscious. Like spokes that go to the center of the wheel, you need the multiple spokes to have the wheel whole. And that's what's so great about our panel and our friends here, is that each of us come from a different perspective, because each of us as different human beings have different ways and techniques and means. You're describing a Kabbalistic numerological system.
Exactly.
All right? For those of us from a Kabbalistic numerological past, yeah, we go, sure, it's there. But not everyone comes from that background, that past. Not everyone sees things from that perspective. They see things from other perspectives, like spokes on a wheel. We all come from different places to come back to the same whole. And that's why I think it's so great and beautiful about what we do, because as we are different, every one of us are part of the greater whole to be able to provide for each of us in our unique differences. So what Caroline offers is wonderful and beautiful, Jonathan as well, because each of us are going to respond like a language to what each of us speaks and harmonize with. And that's how we all come together. So what you're pointing to is an old technique. It's back in the book of the Jubilees that you'll find. It was written over 2,000 years ago. And it brings down all this stuff. And it's wonderful if that is your perspective of vision.
Let me tag on to what Ariel is saying about Jung's contribution. If you find the psychological theory as a sort of friendly approach to this, and you're interested in the interconnection, the kind of thing that the number theories show, he lays it out in Western psychology. He was using esoteric sources, so it's all coming from Kabbalah and things like this, but in terms of the language, it's kind of user-friendly. And his idea of the collective unconscious explains a great deal of what Carolyn was describing earlier.
Okay.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello. Ricardo here. My question is, considering the existence of parallel universes, right? If humans die and the spirits go to one of those parallel universes, right? And maybe aliens live in a different parallel universe. Means that when aliens die, they can meet with human spirits in this different parallel universe? That's one question. And my real question is, have you heard about any experience from mediums receiving messages from alien spirits?
Of course, like tons. So I think there's a confusion here with what people call parallel universe. The scientists tell us that there are many universes that are parallel to each other. That's not at all how I see it. In fact, I had a long talk about that. It's also in my books. What happens is, before you incarnate in a human body, your consciousness has a mass, and you're able to determine, it's all a computation actually, but you're able to determine how many of you, or how you're going to divide, let's say, your consciousness into how many bodies, depending on the mass of your consciousness. So before you come in, you could be in one body, you could be in 10 bodies, you could be in 100 bodies over time and space. Another one incarnating in BC, one in AD, and so on and so forth. But also some incarnating on other planets at the same time. So from that perspective, all of your aspects are actually parallel. But from this perspective, when you tap back into one of those aspects, it feels or it sounds like a past life. So this is how it happens for you and for all the aliens. And so it's the same thing, because all created being can do the same. So everything is simultaneous. There's no time space from that perspective. So we're constantly in parallel existence all over the time. And so if you train yourself, going back to the training, that's the point, is you are able to tap back into one of your parallel aspects on this planet or somewhere else, or with the consciousness of another alien being in another time-space dimension. So it's all simultaneous. So this is really the way parallel existence actually works. It doesn't make sense to have, like scientists tell us, the same thing happening in many universes doing the same thing. Like, what is the point of that? You know, it makes more sense to be doing something different in every aspect, in every existence.
It's not really my area, but I faintly remember that some of the well-known channeling documents are entities on other planets.
Yeah, exactly. So because of that, you can tap into any consciousness at anywhere, at any point, just like that.
Perfect.
Thank you. All right, next question, please.
Thank you.
Good morning, my name's Dan McWhorter. So if I've understood and heard you correctly, each of you have expressed at various points an agreement that there's an ability to see the future. You know, like Nostradamus, the ability to prophesize or predict some future event. And I've also heard you say that we have an innate ability to alter our reality, our environment. And to me, that would seem to be
In contradiction
to a point, because if you
Can I just tell you real quick?
Sure.
Like I said earlier, it's a world of probability. So all the people that have been pouring in, hey, it's the end of the world, are probably going to manifest that outcome. And those who have been saying, hey, you know, we're going to the Enlightenment era, are going to manifest that. So you have both potential, both probable future, so that any point in time you get to create what you want for yourself. So you see, it's both. It's already having momentum, it's probably already doing that, but you can still change the outcome for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I've heard that, but again, if Nostradamus can predict, say, Napoleon or Hitler.
Hold on a second. I'm going to jump in.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me help you with understand, if I can.
Yeah.
Okay? Our problem in our minds, right, that we think very, very, literal. We think like in a square, when reality is more like a circle.
Yeah.
So we don't really get the fact that you can have things which are apparently contradictory, but really aren't. And I'll give an example. Look at reality. Let's talk logically. We all know what logical, practical talk is, right? But now let's go into a dream. And all of a sudden, dream language and dream experience is very, very different. Which reality is real? They're both real, each within their own perspective. So the biblical prophets and Michel de Nostradamus, read his quatrains, I have. They're not clear and precise. They're not going to say, all right, next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, this is going to happen. It never says that. It's more like a dream. And people have come to these words and they look at them and they say, well, it's like this or it's like that, however something materializes. Because that's what we call the quantum potential reality. It can take multiple forms. And that's why, like Carolyn gave a very advanced lesson there about the nature of what we call the soul. The soul is considered to be not just something tangible, visible, it's something far greater than that. And it can be in multiple places in multiple times. We call that soulmates. And literally, if you want to talk about reincarnation, you can reincarnate into the past as easy as you can reincarnate into the future. Mm-hmm. You can reincarnate into another world, into another form, as well as you can reincarnate here into your dog. I mean, consciousness is consciousness. Awareness is awareness, right? Just 2 little seconds. I have a German Shepherd who I love. I call him my canine son. Everyone thinks I'm nuts. I have a communication with this other soul. We communicate. No, I don't hear him talking. We don't actually discuss politics. But, I mean, there's something real. Anyone out there, if any of you are pet lovers, you know what I'm talking about. All right? Because this is just something real. We think too mechanically. We have to expand the way we think. This is the answer to your question. It's not this or that.
Yes.
It's this and that.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me really praise Ariel. He said it very, very well. In developmental psychology, it's considered a sign of mature thinking to be able to tolerate contradiction, not resolve the contradiction, but hold it at the same time.
Great. Thank
Excellent.
you.
We have time for one last question. For those of you waiting in line who didn't make it up, please do join us at our next session and ask again.
Oh, thank you. First of all, just to try to get on your good side, I can't normally see auras, but I don't know if it's the lighting. I've been noticing the most exquisite green around Caroline Cory. But I was wondering, like, the episode of Ancient Aliens with Isetti Ranch? Do you know why James Gilliland was cut out of that episode?
Do we know why he was cut out?
Yeah, he says he gave you all the information and you didn't even include him in the episode.
Well, I have to tell you that often in the editing process, not every story makes it into the cut. We will be working in the future with James Gilliland, and if you stay tuned, you'll get a lot more information.
Well, thank you.
I've been cut out in the past.
It's okay.
She has.
I'm sorry.
We all get cut.
Don't take it personally. Don't take it personally.
As long as there's no agenda to hide the truth.
No, that's not what we're in the business of doing, and I think everybody here knows that.
That's right.
Okay, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Can I have a round of applause for our panelists? Enjoy the rest of AlienCon. Thank you for coming. We can't do this without you.
Thank you.